Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, YouTubers. How's everybody doing tonight? Alrighty, we interrupt this program. A.T. Hagan, section titled Anticipation. Part 1. Don't yawn, you put countryman to sleep. Oh, I'm so sorry. All right. Long day, I went shopping by myself. That was, I don't like to go shopping, but somebody was here guarding the fort. So I got to go by, or I went by myself. All right, so did it take longer than it would have, or was it a lot faster than I would have? As long as it took, it probably would have been a lot longer. So, because of women's. All right, there we go. Intro, Joe. Okay, this is anticipation. Anticipation, yeah. Anticipation is making me late. Okay. Thomas Turkey, you have been found guilty of the crime of being in good taste and have been condemned by the Court of Public Appeal. Sentence will now be carried out. Domino nobisco et tu oreo. The axe whistled slightly as it fell and struck home with a solid thunk into the wood stump. The bound, decapitated bird thrashed momentarily on the floor of the barn and was still. Daddy, you are so strange, Melinda said, screwing up her face at her father. You do this every year. John grinned at his daughter and winked at her. Sure do, Mel. Just something to lighten up an otherwise somber occasion. Young Master Thomas here has declined to object, though. Run and see if Grandpa's got the water ready yet. Weird, Daddy, weird. You're going to give me a complex or something, she said as she skipped out of the door into the barnyard where her grandfather was firing a large pot of water. Grandpa, Daddy's killed the turkey and wants to know if the water's ready yet. The older man took the lid off the pot and looked in. Tell him to bring it out. It's hot enough. The girl skipped back into the barn and soon came back out with her father and the bird. Daddy, do I really have to help pluck? It smells so gross when you put the bird in the water. You enjoyed last year's turkey, didn't you? Well, we can't cook a bird with its feathers still on, so pluck we must. You're old enough now to start participating in the process. I want you to understand where your food comes from, and this is just a part of it. Now stop stalling. Run and get Heather and Brittany. By the time you're all back here, the bird will be out of the water. His daughter wrinkled up her nose but said, yes, sir, then ran into the house to fetch the other girls. Presently, they all three returned, accompanied by Lisa. She asked, do you want me to assist? John looked at her for a moment, then grinned. Ever plucked a turkey or a chicken before? She gave a sickly smile and said, yes, as a matter of fact. Dad kept hens and raised a half a dozen turkeys every year. Butchering day was a family affair. Well then, I reckon you've seen the elephant, or should I say the turkey, and may be excused. Come, girls, should be cool enough to start plucking. The feathers comes out easier while he's still hot. Brittany wrinkled her nose and said, ew, he stinks. Are we going to eat that? It looks disgusting. Robert chuckled and said, he won't smell like that when Ann takes him out of the oven. Just think about how good he'll taste tomorrow. Heather looked pale and said, Mom, if I don't eat any turkey tomorrow, do I still have to help pluck? That smell is awful. Lisa laughed. I tried that same approach with your grandfather. The first time he actually let me get out of plucking. But he held me to not eating turkey the next day too, so no matter how much I wailed. Just breathe through your mouth and start plucking. This is all part of the country experience, dear Art. And like Uncle John said this morning, it's important to know where your food comes from and how it got onto your plate. I survived, and so will you. You will too. Like Grandpa Robert said, just think about how good it'll taste tomorrow. John hung the bird by the feet from the cross arm of a post and started pulling feathers. After a moment's hesitation, Melinda joined him. Brittany and Heather hung back, but with a gentle nudge from Lisa, they stepped forward and started in as well. With 4 sets of hands working, the bird was soon denuded. Robert loosely rolled up some newspaper and lit it on fire. Passing the flame over the carcass, he singed off the small hairs and remaining pin feathers that were left. Now that Mr. Tom here has been shucked out of his suit, Robert said, we'll hang him in the wood shop overnight so he won't freeze to age a bit, then gut him out in the morning. What? Heather raised an eyebrow at this and said, you're going to leave the guts in all night? Gross. John laughed and said, it's an old practice, darling, been done for centuries. Makes a big difference in the flavor. Don't worry, the meat won't spoil. With that, he poured out the water to quench the fire, and then he took the pot over to the hose to wash it out. Usually we butcher out a few old hens too, since we've got the pot set up, but I decided to take it easy on you three, being your first time and all. Next week we'll butcher chickens. Nothing like an old hen to make the best chicken and dumplings you've ever tasted. The girls took the news with an evident lack of glee, but no one protested. With the pot clean, John hung it on the post to dry, then unscrewed the hose from the tap, drained it, and covered the spigot. Well, now that we're done with that, let's go in the house. My hands are freezing from the water. This is the coldest weather I've ever plucked birds in. The family walked into the house. As they passed the porch thermometer, it read 21 degrees. Inside, they warmed their hands over the wood stove, and then the females went into the kitchen to begin working on the midday meal. Robert asked his son, when do you want to do the rest of the turkeys? Might as well get them into the freezer. They're plenty big enough now. Don't see much point in continuing feeding them. John picked up the poker, opened the stove door, and stirred the fire before adding another log. As he put the tool back in its stand, he said, reckon we can go ahead and do the other two bronze birds next week when we do the cull hens. We'll do the bourbon red hen with the gimpy wing too. I don't know if that's congenital or not, but no sense in passing on bad genes if it is. I want to conserve the rest of the bourbon reds and breed them next year. With 5 hens and 2 toms, we've got the start of a good flock. If we cull ruthlessly, we should weed out any bad genes fast enough. His father considered this for a moment and then asked, you want to start breeding turkeys? Well, Dad, John rubbed the back of his neck. I think we probably should. We've always ordered from McMurray or Privet or Ideal, but I don't know if they even still exist now. And if they do, they'll still be able to ship birds next spring. I'd hate to butcher what potential breeding stock we have now, only to discover that we can't get any more poults or chicks. Besides, we know feed's going to be expensive for at least the next several years. Turkeys are a lot more efficient at living off of what they can forage than a chicken. Probably be a better idea to use them for meat birds and just keep chickens for eggs aside from surplus roosters and cull hens. If we have any luck with them by this time next year, we could have quite a flock of bourbon red turkeys ready for market, and I think they'll sell big. Acorn crop was sparse this year, so next year's crop ought to be good, and we know turkeys get fat on acorns. I'd breed the broad-breasted bronze birds too, but they're hybrids, and we don't have a large enough gene pool to fool with all the weeding we'd have to do. Robert nodded his head. Makes sense. Come January, we better separate out what chickens we want to breed and pen them up separately. We could probably triple the number of hens we've got if that old incubator still works. We'll need to pull it out and check it over. It's going to need a good cleaning and a coat of paint at least. If the thermostat wafer is bad, we'll have to scare up a replacement from somewhere. I seem to recall the one that's in it now is the spare one we bought when we got it. I expect Bill over to the feed store will have one, John said. He always had wafers and some of the other common incubator parts that needed to be replaced. Never seemed to sell many of them, but you know, the moment I express an interest, he'll want a pretty price. Even if the one that's in it there now works, we'd best have a spare on hand, otherwise we could lose an entire hatch if it goes bad.